Okay, now what I want you to try and do, okay, is look at questions 1 and 2 in the pack. Okay, these are ones that Acer used to put on their website. They're not available anymore, okay, but they give you kind of a reasonably good idea of what you actually have to try and do. Now, one of the important things is timing, okay? So very, very important that you actually spend the no more than the requisite amount of time on each particular question. So what I'm actually going to do now is obviously give you 3 minutes to do both of those questions. Then I'll tell you to stop and we'll vote and we'll see how the people get on. Then I'll explain some of the techniques. So basically on page 14, question 1 and question 2, have a go at working those out, and then you'll be able to cast your vote in a second when I switch over to the other computer. Okay, now this is quite common, all right, the correct answer indeed is B. It's very rare, right, on the course that the most popular answer is not the correct answer. Now you can have sometimes a far more even distribution if it's a tricky one, okay? But you can see here, you know, that of the 40 units that are out, everybody did vote, so that's excellent. And you can see that the most popular answer was in fact B, which was 23 of the students correctly picked that. And we'll talk about the technique behind that in a second. It's a very simple piece of technique. Okay, now, I thought the second one was a little bit trickier. Okay, so let's see how people got on this. So can you vote now in question 2? So we take a look at it here. Again, the correct answer indeed was B, but this was a little bit more tricky. And you can see, of course, you know, I think it was 23 students got the last one right. Only 18 got this one right. So it's a very, very important, and I would suspect, and it's of course one of the things for people to help them learn, there may be some students, and it's a way we can figure it out, and you can get a report on this basis. There are some people who probably got the first one correct that didn't get the second one correct. And it's a thing for you to try and figure out, where are you in the scheme of things, where might you have a weakness, where do you need to improve. Okay, so let's very quickly take a look at it. Again, you're all comfortable with those now in a second. We're going to go on to a 3-part question in a minute, but I just want to talk very briefly about 2 little techniques with those 2 particular questions. Okay, so if you look at number 1, and the correct answer was B, and everybody's happy with that, this is one of the things where you have to watch out for keywords. Now, one of the first techniques that you might have thought would be applicable to this particular question is numbers in the narrative. You can see there's a lot of numbers in the narrative of the question, and you might have said to yourself, you know, what they'll do here is they'll try and be tricky somehow, and that they'll talk about the fact that it was twice as much, or it was 3 times as much in the answers. So you can see 200% and 300%. But a very, very important thing is if we take a look at the answer, we can see it gives very, very specific information, and it talks about this. It talks about species. And the only one of the answers that talks about species is B. So you have to be very careful looking at the keywords in the narrative. Sometimes one of the most keywords are actually numbers, because numbers are totally unambiguous. They're very precise. So again, you'd have looked at that, but then you would have seen there were no numbers in the answers. So you would have dismissed that as a technique. And then what you have to look at is look at the very precise nature of the information. Don't be making assumptions or inferring something. You have to make a conclusion. And the only conclusion you can make based on the narrative you've got is to do with the species. Okay. The next one here is certainly an awful lot more challenging. Okay, now I think it is working. Yeah. So this one is where your colleague that asked the question about the rough work paper is very, very important. Because what you have here is a narrative that's quite lengthy. Now we saw that a smaller number of people got this correct. We know the right answer is B. But how do we know it's B? 2 very important techniques here. The first one of them is, in actual fact, is to actually diagram the narrative, because you need to get all the information down into a very, very succinct amount of data that you can see all at one time. And a way of doing that is a little bit, I suppose, like some of the mathematics skills you might have, is to actually kind of assign variables or abbreviations to the key data. So we take a look at it here. We have EC oil and pine elix, 2 very important variables. So we're going to have EO and PE. Okay? They're good for easing the pain of these bites. To test whether there's any difference, she applies EC oil to her left side. So EC oil is on the left side and pine elix on the right side. So straight away now what you've done is you've tried to actually bring this down into a much, much smaller, almost postage stamp size piece of information. Now, the second part is we have to be very, very careful about the way that they can twist something. And you may have kind of covered this you talk about you have to be very careful about positive increase in numbers not being positive outcomes. So for example, a positive increase in unemployment is a negative outcome. All right? A negative decrease in unemployment is a positive outcome. So you have to be very careful about the fact that just because something might numerically be more positive than it was previously doesn't mean the outcome is more positive than previously. So you have to be very careful in the way that stuff is twisted. So you take a look at it here. It says the next day the bites on the left side feel considerably better. Okay? So we would kind of go that they're very good. But those on the right side only feel a little better. So they're good. Okay? So the EC oil on the left-hand side is very good. The Pine-Elex on the right-hand side is just good. Now then you have to look at it and say, okay, Pine-Elex actually delays recovery considerably. So Pine-Elex on the right-hand side is just good. Delaying recovery considerably is just good. It's not a very good outcome. A better outcome is EC oil because it delays recovery somewhat less. In other words, what they're saying is Pine-Elex takes longer to work. EC oil, right, it works faster. So what you basically have to do is try and get all of those words, which are just confusing, try and get them down to something very, very short and sweet and succinct, and then you're able to interrogate the answers, and you basically know then the correct answer is B. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, so two important techniques to watch out for there. Watch out obviously for keywords. This is just applicable to section 1 obviously. Watch out for keywords in the narrative. And then in the second one there's two techniques. All right, try and diagram or get your actual narrative down to a set of key variables or just some symbol set you understand. It's only you that needs to understand it. And then be very careful about the way something is put to you, because delaying recovery considerably versus delaying recovery somewhat less means that the second one is actually better than the first one. All right? Whereas if it was improves recovery considerably, improves recovery somewhat less, it would be the other way around. So you have to be very careful about the way that you look at stuff like that. And again, part of this is, this is just not stuff that you've done before in Leaving Cert or college exams. So it's just an amount of adjustment, practice and preparation, and you shouldn't have any problem in getting a score that you deserve.